everything in this matchup. So it's really hard to say, like to really like quantify the state of it, because people are still just kind of doing what they've been doing. But we're loaded in. We're ready to kick this off. In the bottom left of Eternal Empire, we have the blue Terran player. We have MarineLord.
And up at the top right-hand side of the map, a man who barely fits in his main base because he is Big Gabe.
And Eternal Empire, as we've said a billion times, good defensive map, blah, 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 blah. TVT, at least I'm just going to give the quick breakdown since we haven't seen a second gas after the barracks. So it looks like both players want to go for Reaper expands, usually leads into the quick reactor following that. If they're worried about getting hit with like multiple things, then they'll probably get a Marine after the Reaper and get the factory a little bit earlier is one of the other ways that people shake it up. But since both players SCV scouted, they actually crossed paths in the middle of the map at the exact same time. So with the scout timing, it should be obvious to both of them that they're both going for Reaper expands and that they don't have to worry about anything like cheese. So at the end of the day, we get the news that's going to start off and be kind of just like a normal matchup. You'll get your command center up, you get your second gas, go into the reactor. Still very 1-1-1 focused is this matchup. You're not going to see a lot of multiple barracks openings. The Raven is probably the most important unit at the start. It's going to have the biggest impact on being able to make pushes with interference matrix on tanks. Auto turrets for harass, which I'm not as big of a fan of, or auto turrets for big fights, which can have a devastating impact and really soak up a ton of damage if they're placed correctly.
Yeah, I know for TVT, there was a good period of time where a lot of Terran players were like, all right, 3 Ravens was a big thing about a lot of the openings, but I feel like that's definitely faded off. So why was it that we ended up seeing fewer Ravens kind of made in those earlier stages of TVT these days?
Well, it was like a weird lull period. And this Reaper is actually going to roll up and nothing is here to stop it. So it could be a tiny delay on the factory, which would be very nice. Any sort of offset of tech like this is pretty huge, but his Reaper's actually getting really low. Sorry, I'm going to answer your question at some point. Losing the Reaper in this situation always sucks, but he kind of pulls back to make sure that A, he has a chance to get away, but B, that he doesn't get counterattacked because he doesn't really have anything on the other side of the map. But the whole Raven thing was like, at first they did 20, it was like 24 damage or 22 damage or whatever a hit. They 2-shot Marines and SCVs, and they were really good against drones and stuff as well. And then I think Special played one game where he killed like 70 drones with Raven harass. And then Blizzard was like, all right, we're taking the damage down. Now it takes 3 hits. And then Terran players stopped using them as much because you couldn't just completely insta-gib everybody in the same way that you normally would. But then people started mixing it up again. And then this realization kind of came down where people are like, actually, no, the Raven auto turrets are still really good. They're still really strong. They still do a tremendous amount of damage. And actually, there's really no reason for us to have ever stopped building them. So multiple Ravens is still a very popular opener. I know myself, actually, one of the build orders that I really like, and not to make it about me, but I'm going to bring it back to HeRoMaRinE in a second. On his stream, I've been watching him, and I actually copy a lot of his builds because he has some really good multiple Raven openers. I think one of my favorite builds I've seen HeRoMaRinE do is like, he didn't do as many Marines out of the reactored barracks, but he had a really good like 4 Cyclone opener with a couple of Ravens, and it was all about having that early map control. And even though Cyclones aren't really good head-to-head against Marines or siege tanks, he would basically focus on either picking off a base using the vision up the high ground, or just kind of constantly kiting and using the auto turret threat to keep him from trying to siege up tanks or anything like that. And there's just so many different ways that you can play this matchup now because like the old Cyclone being brought back and the versatility of that Raven. Banshees are basically dead in this matchup unless you're playing someone that you know for some weird reason really doesn't like building Ravens. You just don't really see it that much anymore. And honestly, the only crazy thing I've seen in TVT this year that really like, you know, kind of expanded my mind on the matchup was that big TY series. I think it was in GSL where he did that battlecruiser rush, right? On 2 bases on Golden Wall. And that was like the weirdest thing I've seen. But even other players didn't really start doing that after him. So That was still ended up being like a one-off thing. But most of the time you wait for 2 Ravens, swap the starport onto the reactor, start cranking out Vikings, and you just play for the vision and the control, because on this map, that choke point gets turned against you where it's really hard to get your own units around. So some players will go for that quick contain to try and keep you from taking that third base. I don't know if we're going to see that on this map, but if it is going to happen, it's going to happen very soon, because the Vikings are coming out for HeRoMaRinE. The Ravens are still coming out. He's going to build a third one, MarineLord here. And if you drop all those auto turrets, it can be hard. But like if you drop 6 auto turrets in front of an army and then you get into the fight and you drop your turrets before your opponent can, you're going to absolutely obliterate their forces.
Okay, well, Stim is on the way for HeRoMaRinE behind all this with +1 weapons also on the way. In the meanwhile, we do have MarineLord still just getting up those additional barracks. Hasn't done any of the swap around, so it's just going to be about kind of the army that he has going for him right now. And we end up seeing, okay, HeRoMaRiNE's setting up that third base. So you're expecting that, I'm guessing, MarineLord's the one that's going to do the big move out, right?
Honestly,
no, not really.
It can be both players at once usually. Like it is kind of really important to try and make that move out unless you're trying to play mech or something. You don't necessarily have to. It can be also a show of respect that you would do that. The thing with the 3 Raven opening is that you're not going to have that air-to-air power that you would typically have from going for the Vikings earlier, right? And there are designed builds where you only get 1 Raven or you skip them solely because of that, because your opponent will maybe have a Raven or 2, but they won't actually have enough to stop you from just making a big frontal assault and killing them. So I think with the 3 Ravens, the idea is to sit back. The fact that HeRoMaRinE did go into Vikings earlier, he had that option, but frankly speaking, I couldn't possibly tell you why he doesn't want to move out. He's just playing this one close to the chest. It could just be because he knows that he's the favored player in this matchup, and he's just going to try and rely on doing other things like, look how fast these upgrades are coming in.
Yeah, how do you feel about, I guess, MarineLord? He is going for combat shields. It's all well and good and normal. But, I mean, getting a much later stim as well, on top of the fact that he actually even started his combat shields later than the stim for HeRoMaRinE finished up. So it's going to be a good long while. But I know you were saying, like, you think it's probably going to be a little bit more passive in the earlier stages, maybe just little poking and prodding as we see, for example, Cyclone seizing some map.
I mean, honestly, this game has started so passively. I feel like I'm watching NA TVT Fear Dragon. Like, basically nothing has actually happened, despite all the analysis and breakdowns that we've done. And I couldn't really tell you. It could just be respect coming out of HeRoMaRinE that he's like, I'm not going to try and do anything until I actually have stimmed bio out. He's like, I don't want to get into a weird early fight where your 3 Raven build catches me off guard, you know, and then all of a sudden 12 auto turrets kill my whole entire army because you dropped them on my tanks as they're sieging, right? But then at the same time, I really like this. You know, sensor towers used to get memed on, and it kind of took the role of that early Viking thing in TVZ where everyone was like, why don't you just build one at the start? But now,
that one guy on Reddit.
Yeah, and there was that conversation. They were like, why don't Terrans build sensor towers? You can see everything. And Terrans are like, well, they're too expensive. It costs as much as a siege tank. Did you know that? But now, because TVT, Bio, V-Bio especially, turned into so many freaking Doom drops constantly, that the openers are all focused around these Vikings for map control and air control. But everybody gets sensor towers now. Now it's just normal, right? People have they've recognized the value of having that information ahead of time, because it saves you from also needing to scan or put units outside your base, which both of them are still doing anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, like you said, it's going to be very passive, but I think it's so important to highlight that the fact that both these players have invested so much time in making sure there's vision everywhere, especially MarineLord has done an excellent job of verifying, okay, there's no drops coming in, there's no random run-bys or anything, and HeRoMaRiNE's going to try and clean up some of this stuff as he does start to threaten to move out. He has siege tanks on siege. He's got his army by that 4th base and everything, but it does strike a little bit of fear into MarineLord. MarineLord has to respect it.
Yeah, and still, I mean, this is the first big move out is going to happen now at max supply, which I guess if we're making memes about Wings of Liberty and stuff today, then that is it. But I'm gonna mention something that is giving me a little bit of a head scratch here. It's that medevac's only just now starting to be built for MarineLord, so he was extremely focused on being able to prevent any big drops or like weird Liberator stuff from happening to him. Oh, but Gabe has 6 medevacs. And this is actually really awkward. Like just the healing ability if they get into a fight is something I'm going to be, like I said, scratching my head about, I guess, for a little while now.
This is also going to be a very awkward timing right now because MarineLord is now getting basically put into a very awkward position where, yes, he does have a large number of these Vikings and everything, but I don't think that MarineLord actually wants to engage directly in Marine versus Marine fights right now while he's still lacking 2-2 versus the 2-2 of HeRoMaRinE. So HeRoMaRinE is trying to find an angle. I'm trying to think why HeRoMaRinE isn't able to move a little bit further forward behind that base, but I guess he does not want to get caught into a position he cannot escape from. There come the interference matrices on those siege tanks. He's going to be able to disable quite a bit of HeRoMaRinE's army.
Yeah, so here's what happened. He loaded up all those medevacs and sent them to the main because he realized the Vikings were occupied with his own forces. So a big drop for HeRoMaRinE is going to land inside of his base. He left one medevac by the third as well to get all the SCVs over there. 16 plus 9 focuses down the main orbital, and he's getting on top of the production. Fear Dragon, we know one of the biggest weaknesses of Terran is being able to protect that production. All the Marines that are popping out, getting scooped up. Now the rest of the forces are going to come over, and he may not be able to save the Marines, but oh, that's actually a really good Dorito cannon. Somehow dodges it with a bunch of his Marines, but he's going to clean that up. And I do think, yeah, I guess he's going to get these medevacs. So HeRoMaRinE does a pretty big blow to him. And since these players both powered up so much, I mean, HeRoMaRinE's rich. So he's not sweating it from this thing. Really, it's the air advantage that's gone. But since neither player is going mech and we don't have ranged liberators in play yet, still anything can happen. I'm just going to say again out loud, it is weird that both European Terrans have kind of just immediately ceded this to the late game, which is it's just a very unusual, I feel like.
Yeah, I also really love the way that MarineLord actually defended his main base as well. As soon as he saw, like, okay, these medevacs are starting to dart over to the right, immediately just sends all the Vikings over. He's like, these Marines are dead. The Vikings don't need to be here anymore. And was, because of that, able to pick up all those medevac kills. So I do feel like this is where maybe MarineLord, like you said, they're both rich. They're both replenishing a lot of that army supply. Maybe just before 3-3 finishes up over here for HeRoMaRinE, this is where MarineLord can make something happen. Not with those Dorito cannons coming out.
Yeah, that's a big fight going down. And despite the Dorito cannon, one of the biggest things is stepping forward with those Marines like that. Wow. Just minimize the amount that splash does. You know, it's unfortunate, but the anti-armor missile is really going to have the most impact when you're getting hit by, like, when you're in like a Marine fight. The tanks don't actually benefit as much from it as you might think, because at the end of the day, siege tanks are almost always guaranteed is that it's going to take 2 hits to kill Marines, right? Like that's just how it works.
Yeah, well, that does mean that good old HeRoMaRinE is able to take that first game. Like you said, it was some really good positioning, especially with a lot of his army supply, and just being able to do that big doom drop and really catch MarineLord out of position there. Really excellently done. Even it's scary to me as someone who's not a Terran player and doesn't have to play TVT. I watch some of that stuff and I'm like, ooh, you're splitting up your army. You're just going to lose all of your tanks over there. But it still ends up being okay because you kill a command center and a bunch of the production. I have to say, Nate, I'm glad I'm not a Terran player because TVT looks very stressful to play.
Yeah, well, TVT is extremely stressful to play. And we didn't even have to worry about the early game variation in there, right? Like when I think of TVT, I get nervous because I always feel like I never have enough at the start to be able to defend what my opponent is doing because there are so many different things that you can do. However, man, it's just so weird that they both went Reaper Expand and neither of them thought, yeah, I'm going to try and do the 2-base move out. Like just the level of respect for both of them to have for each other. But I don't want to say lack of confidence in themselves. It's just unusual. There are like 99% of the time, if you're better than your opponent and you get matched in a TVT and you do that move out, you're like, yeah, I'm going to win. Like if I control better than this guy, I'm probably just going to kill him right here. So the fact that neither of them were willing to try doing that, I guess watching the other games that MarineLord has played, HeRoMaRinE is not going to pull any punches. He's not going to take any chances at all of overextending like that, getting caught or base traded or caught off guard by some proxy. Just it's just a very interesting start for a series like this, considering that it's a best of 5.
All right, well, we're moving into game number 2, and we're gonna be starting down here on top of the red Terran player, setting up 1-0. He is HeRoMaRinE.
And his opponent in the Northeast, the blue Terran player, he is MarineLord.
So Nate, I want to test your esports history. All right. How long? What year do you think it was that HeRoMaRinE joined Team Mouse Sports?
Oh my God. I think he's like one of the longest running members on any team. If Team Liquid ever kicked out retired players.
That's true.
But, oh, dude, didn't HeRoMaRinE join Mouse Sports? I remember it was actually a pretty big deal. They had one other player, I think, at the time, and now HeRoMaRine's the only one that they still have from StarCraft. Was it? If it was news that I heard about, then I was really active. So,
commit.
I don't know, 2013?
2011. He has been
2011.
Mouse Sports esports since 2011. Isn't that crazy? Talk about commitment. Talk about commitment. This is a committed attack, by the way.
Yeah. Well, he's going for the proxy double barracks Marauder, which is like, this build is fantastic because if you SCV scout your opponent in TVT and you see that there's nothing in their base and you don't get to go up the ramp into the wall because there's like the free depots or whatever, you might think to yourself, oh, I'm getting proxy Reaper. Oh, I know what I need to deal with this, right? I can pull some SCVs, get a bunker up, and I'm fine. But then what happens is your Reaper's at the front of your ramp, gets tagged by the Marauder. It can't run away anymore because it's got concussive shells. And then you lose the game because he's just going to pick off all of your SCVs that are trying to repair the bunker, or he gets a bunker at the bottom of your natural ramp and blows up all of your supply depots. And 99% of the time, you build like maybe 3-4 Marauders with this. You get some work done, and he scouts one of the barracks. Okay, seeing the tech lab is actually really important. Seeing the tech lab is really important. I love the Widow Mine. Oh, I love the Widow Mine. So the SCV is going to have to try and soak the Widow Mine shot. But Widow Mines do kill the Marauders to the best of my knowledge. So it is going to barely be able to close that out. And Marauders don't deal bonus damage to them. But this is why these two SCVs are here. And he just does not really have a lot to deal with this. He's going to have to bring the SCVs. Now, when you see that mine, you do want to be really cautious about it, but the next thing that always happens is one of these barracks is probably going to float over to that natural so that he can shoot up the ramp at the depots and just kind of like slide his way around the Widow Mines. Meanwhile, SCVs are just trying to deal with the Reaper back inside of MarineLord's base. This is the weakness of the strategy, obviously. And since he only took one gas and he's still building Marauders, he can't afford the factory. So he might... I don't think trying to brute force your way up here is the correct decision either, though. I think you lift one of the barracks, get the vision, and stop building Marauders.
The Reapers actually... That's game ending, right?
I think the Reapers have just about done it. He sent one Marauder home. So he has done enough damage. But look at the worker count, right? It's not unlosable. Survives.
Oh my God, it's going to get another kill, too.
That was pretty sick. That Reaper should have been dead.
That was a great grenade that keeps it alive. Yeah,
the fact that he's still building Marauders and he didn't just like get stim and just YOLO up the ramp is pretty bold.
One-shot a bunker? How many Marauders do you need to one-shot a bunker?
No, I mean, to get the vision, to get all them there, he would at least take enough damage to maybe lose one. But I mean, if the bunker has 1 armor by default, or I don't know, bunkers might have 0 armor by default, honestly. 400 hit points, Marauders deal, what is it, 20 damage?
I didn't actually expect you to do the math on stream. Nate, you could have been...
I don't know. You need a lot of Marauders to one-shot a bunker, but yeah. He clears out the Reaper in his base, but he never took that second gas. Like, what the thing here is, Fear Dragon, he doesn't have anything to deal with the Banshee that's being made. So it doesn't matter. Like, nothing else that happens in this game matters. There's no engineering bay. There's no factory. There's no Marines. Even if he busts this ramp, there's already nothing he can do. And he's going to build... The tank is almost done for HeRoMaRinE. I mean, I hate to say it. I really don't like being one of the casters that ever does this, but I don't see a path to victory. This Banshees could... If he maybe just doesn't look at the factory for 20 minutes, but if he just sees it, kills the SCV building the factory, he will never finish it, and then the game is over because it's only Marauders.
We could very well just see the tap out right over here, but I think this MarineLord is kind of floundering and saying, all right, take the Marauders. It's base trade time at this point. The barracks is going to land over there. Okay,
I think he landed the barracks hoping that a tank would shoot at it, but he had the tank really far back. GG. HeRoMaRinE, easy win right there. Very well done. Yeah, you don't see many Terrans really commit to the Marauders for that reason alone. The thing is, like, it can be a momentum build where, like, if you do a lot of damage and they pull their SCVs, you drag them out of their base, you get a lot of kills. Sure, you've delayed their tech to the point where you can build a bunch more Marauders and overwhelm them, right? Because they think you're going to transition. But what happened in this game was he didn't do enough damage. He lost a bunch of SCVs back at home from the Reapers. So like the tech was always there for HeRoMaRinE. Like all he ever needed to do was build like 2 bunkers and get a siege tank, and then he can't be broken. The Marauders didn't even have stim. Like usually people who are going to stick that build like that will get stim because it's the only possible other thing that you can add to it.
Even though it takes so long to get to, at which point I think the Banshee would have already properly popped out at that point. So it's a pretty tough, nearly unwinnable position just after the way that HeRoMaRinE immediately reacted. Getting the scout out was a great move there from HeRoMaRinE, and just kind of identifying, like saying, look, I am on paper just the better player by a good margin. MarineLord's a great player. HeRoMaRinE is just big game, right? Like you play it safe. You do just scout around for the random cheeses and stuff because that's how MarineLord will be able to take a map. I don't know that I have a lot of confidence that's going to be able to work out another way.
Yeah, well, HeRoMaRine's playing very well. And I think that this series is kind of playing out as expected. You know, they both tried to do the, hey, let's power up and fight with max supply. And HeRoMaRinE just outplayed him. And then the second game, MarineLord's like, well, I'm going to try and go for the cheese. And just to, you know, expand upon why somebody would go for a strategy like that. If you go for a regular Reaper expand, and then that Reaper does not see the proxy barracks, right? If he say he barely misses it, he might just build a command. He might just build a command center on the low ground. There's a lot of those builds where you pull off gas, right? But the thing about that double gas opener, and really the strongest part of it, is that you always have the option to just put your workers back on there and then build a tank, right? And that gives you an absurd amount of flexibility against these types of builds, whether it's proxy Reapers, whether it's proxy Marauders. And obviously the Marauders need to get past the wall. So as long as you just repair that, all you got to do is survive to a tank, and then the tank will keep your ramp safe, right? And then you get the Banshee, which you usually can't afford the Banshee because usually this build does more damage, but he scouted it and he defended well. So he was always going to win the game pretty much as soon as he had anything to counterattack with.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that we get to see another proxy here? Do you think MarineLord is just going to try and go for it again? Or
I don't think it would be.
That, but something
I think
else.
it would be better to try to do like some sort of wind up build, like if you were gonna all in. I think in TVT right now the best way to all in is on 2 bases with that Raven move out. Like if you really want to commit to trying to kill the other guy, doing it on 1 base does not really work very well unless you're on the ladder and you're like a barcode and nobody knows who you are, because he's gonna be ready for it. In the bottom left, trying to win 3 maps in a row now to bring it back, he is MarineLord.
And up at the top right-hand side of the map, we have the red Terran player up 2-0. He is HeRoMaRinE. I think one of the scary things to me about good old Big Gabe is that, yeah, he might mix in a cheese here and there, but it's just, he doesn't need to. And he knows it. He doesn't really end up doing a lot of those big cheesy plays. He plays solid standard macro StarCraft, and he's so scary for it. And that's a tough kind of player to beat, I feel like.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing, like I said, about TVT, and this is a really hard one for me to accept because I do a lot of weird stuff and I beat a lot of players that are better than me because they just don't have practice against my weird styles. But in TVT, I find it impossible to beat anybody that's better than me. To just steal maps, it doesn't happen. Like TVT is just such a punishing matchup as far as mistakes go that beating somebody who's better than you is usually not going to happen. It is very, very, very hard to catch somebody off guard with something in Terran versus Terran just because everybody does everything. There is no like, oh yeah, no one does this in TVT. No, there's plenty of people who are going to play good mech on good mech maps. Plenty of people who will do Raven openings, Cyclone openings, you know, and then the other stuff just doesn't really work that well against it, right? Like a Raven and a Cyclone into Vikings, even if you try to Battlecruiser rush, like half the builds will just blind counter it on accident. Same thing with Banshees. Like, oh, my Banshee's here. There's a Cyclone and a Raven, you know, that's it. You get nothing.
All right, Marine going to make the difference over here in terms of the DPS. So HeRoMaRinE will not be able to use that SCV, get an additional hit off on his opponent's Reaper. And start pushing things back. So MarineLord doing a good job at the early game kind of defense over there against the pretty standard, typical Reaper harassment and everything. We get to move into the next stage of the game. But yeah, the safety bunker there from MarineLord kind of showcasing that he is just a little bit more concerned about any kind of aggression from HeRoMaRinE.
Yeah, and I mean, those are those things that the tiny things that people do at the top of the ladder, where that you see that and you're like, oh, one Reaper and an SCV. Like, does this ever do anything? Oh yeah, if you know how many players go for Reaper into Reactor to get fast Hellions, and that build is really, really hard to deal with. But if you go across the map like a crazy man and actually try to poke, and your SCV soaks one hit from the opposing Reaper, and your Reaper wins that fight, you're going to kill like 3 or 4 SCVs and possibly even block the Reactor from getting to the factory. And you can just straight up win the game right there. Like, that happens. Like, crazy stuff happens in TVT. But as I said, if that doesn't work, or if you show up 5 seconds too late, all of a sudden they've got a Reaper and 2 Hellions. Your Reaper dies, they counterattack, and then you're like, maybe I have a Cyclone that's about to finish, and now he's got to kill 4 Hellions. What do I do, right? Like, that's TVT in a nutshell. It's just that like the power spikes as each individual unit comes out in the first 7 minutes is just like astronomical. And then once you get to that point where you're at over 100 supply, you can kind of afford to be like, oh yeah, I lost a couple units here, lost a medevac there. But like in this early game, like every single unit is so important.
Yeah, well, we do end up seeing that HeRoMaRinE is finally going to get a chance to send out that Reaper again, probably just trying to look for any kind of scouting information. Behind all this, though, I mean, we have the pretty typical setup. We got a safety Cyclone coming out from both MarineLord and HeRoMaRinE. So good for getting those lock-ons, kind of pushing back your opponent's Ravens, sniping off Vikings or medevacs, all kinds of good stuff. And as the Raven count starts to build up, we do see that, yeah, they're both going to get out on that second Raven as well.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, super standard. 99% of the time, if somebody only gets 1 Raven, it's because they just want to try and attack at a timing where it's 2 Vikings and 1 Raven versus 2 Ravens and no Vikings. So that you can have like your tank vision, maybe kill your opponent's Raven, maybe kill an add-on or something if Stim is being researched too close to the cliff. You know, like there's a lot of different weird things that can happen there. But as far as common denominators for TVT go, it's 2 Ravens, it's an early 3rd command center. Just because the way that the ramp up goes for it, 1-1-1 is all you need to deal with most things too, right? Like there's very few builds that you're going to get extra production early on and be able to kill somebody who goes 3 command centers. Like it just doesn't really happen because, you know, whether you have 16 Marines or 24, if your opponent's got a well-placed tank with a bunker in front of it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're not really busting that anytime soon. So
yeah.
Good to go into another little bit of the macro game as you got Stim starting up there for both of these players, and they should be able to kind of just get up a nice defensive position. And defending a 3rd base isn't too bad on this map, right? As long as you are aware, maybe with the sensor tower that we've been seeing in some of these games, whether your opponent's pushing in for the natural or the 3rd, and then you're pretty much good to go, right? On just getting up the defenses.
Yeah, it depends. There's just too many different variables to take into account, if I'm being honest. Like the sensor tower is the most important thing just to give you your base point. If all of your tanks are pre-sieged, then it becomes really easy to just try and flank you or outmaneuver you. If none of your tanks are sieged and your opponent sees it, then they just drop all their auto turrets in front of you and stim in and then siege their own tanks, right? Like, yeah, you have to be patient, but at the same time flexible. And that's what makes it difficult. That's what makes it hard. Like the way that the Ravens are going to be used, right? You have enough interference matrix to take down all of your opponent's tanks right now at this point in the game. So it's possible that your first fight may have no tanks for your opponent for the first 11 seconds, right? Like there's so many things that you have to take into account and be ready for. But as far as this game goes, it's giving me vibes from Eternal Empire. Neither player wants to move out and risk getting caught in the middle of the map and be like, oh, you're at my 3rd while I'm in the middle of the map. Now I just lose my 3rd base, and you probably have a tank or 2 already at yours to defend.
Yeah, I love that MarineLord is finally counteracting some of the individual Marines that HeRoMaRinE loves sending around. So, I mean, every single time HeRoMaRinE has sent 1 Marine out, it looks like MarineLord has 2 Marines, and finally HeRoMaRinE actually reclaims this little center area for vision, which pretty important area on this map. And MarineLord trying to clear out some of the Marines on the north side. This is not going to seem that strange to HeRoMaRinE because MarineLord has been pushing him back with a bunch of these little clumps of Marines, a bunch. So he may not expect that the entire army is moving forward. But oh, look at that HeRoMaRinE. He is on top of it. His other 2 tanks
that's the reason why.
Position.
Yeah, that's a good call out, but that's the reason why that's the reason why you had that stuff. But those tanks were not really, weirdly enough, they actually still finished sieging like that. But the auto turrets are there to buffer. As long as his tanks can make it through the interference matrices, they should be okay. And it looks like they will. Now the Marines come out. He's going to land the Vikings. They do a ton of damage to the siege tanks, and he's going to clean this up easy peasy. And that's a tank reset for MarineLord. And this is why it's really risky to do this, because now you've got 6 tanks for HeRoMaRinE versus 1 of his opponent. And he does not have a second factory. So he can try to trickle out siege tanks now. He's actually not even building one. He just started one more. But if he gets caught and it gets into some sort of siege battle, it's going to become incredibly hard to get him offset. But MarineLord's next wave catches him off guard a little bit. That's nice.
Yeah, snipes off a few Marines. Also manages to finish up his own combat shields as well as 1-1. And HeRoMaRinE is very far away, actually, from finishing up combat shields. Is this maybe the time where now, evened up upgrades, you can find an opportunity to just trade Marine versus Marine? You have to find a position where the tanks aren't, but that's where that sensor tower that you keep raving on about comes into play, right? It becomes so difficult to get a big drop into the main or find an opportunity outside of the natural, but HeRoMaRinE actually has Marines covering that area, spec-outing it.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. Like the sensor tower is so important too. Like it just gives you that level of comfort. And I'm surprised that we don't have one on each side for both of them, but that push gets shoved back. You make a good point about combat shields, a 10 hit point difference when you're using units that shoot this fast. It does have a big impact. I also add in that the upgrades have an astronomically large impact that is really impossible to overstate how much it affects the outcome of the game. If you fight 2-2 versus 1-1, you could have like almost like 10, 15 less Marines, and you are going to finish with the majority of yours still alive. Like it's that so big of a deal.
MarineLord was only about 20 seconds behind on his 1-1 finishing up after 2-2 started, but he must have just neglected it for a solid like minute or so, because now he's really far behind. He is going to be able to clean up that drop over there and establish a 4th base, but is that big move out going to work out? It looks like MarineLord is going to just back off, and HeRoMaRinE sees it with the sensor tower that the army is retreating, and that's actually going to prompt him to move out, probably into the range of that his opponent's sensor tower.
Yeah. So MarineLord is, I think, doing a good job trying to be out on the map. You can kind of see where a little bit of that punishment came across with when he was trying to land that 4th base, but at the end of the day, we now have the 3-3 ready to start for HeRoMaRinE. I think staying on top of those upgrades is really big. Hitting a timing here with 2-2 would be difficult. If you could force the fight when you're at 2-2 versus 1-1, you always want to do that. If he lands a Dorito cannon into the middle of those Marines and they all have, -2 armor, it's going to be a slaughter the likes of which you've never seen in StarCraft before.
Oh, yeah. I just realized there's actually still no Raven in here for MarineLord because he lost them earlier during the fight. That's another big thing besides the tank count. But there's the Dorito cannon you were talking about, Nate. And that's a pretty damn good one.
No, why would he stand and fight? Okay, well, he loses about half of his Marines there. And yes, you heard me correctly. Negative armor exists if you don't have more than 3 for the anti-armor missile. He's going to try and siege up his tanks, but the Marines are going to focus fire down a few of them. Now, he has lost enough of the forces that he's starting to squeeze forward a little bit there. He's going to load up and drop his Marines on top of HeRoMaRinE's siege tanks. This is where those Ravens can try to drop auto turrets, maybe? He has the energy. There we go. There's a handful of them. And the tanks unsiege to help clean up the rest of MarineLord's forces outside the 3rd.
And all of the medevacs I just got sniped off by HeRoMaRinE's Vikings. So these Marines are going to be able to snipe off a few more units. There are Marines from HeRoMaRinE trying to rally on in, stemming forward. All at the end of the day, yes, HeRoMaRinE lost a lot there, but he also just reset so much there for MarineLord. 5 tanks and 25 Marines is what MarineLord's army is at. HeRoMaRinE still has air superiority, still has a Raven alive, has a superior tank count and a superior Marine count, and has his 3-3 still, even with the late start on 3-3, it's still going to be almost a minute and a half ahead.
Now, I mean, this is where we bring back the old school TVT rules. If you've got your tanks, there's always an opportunity to come back here. You can win with way less Marines than your opponent if you get good tank shots. That splash damage is really big, but This is what happens when you start to fall behind and you have everything at the front. Big drop over towards the main base. Now, if you could keep the tanks alive and get them to siege up and lock this position down, it's going to become almost impossible to unseat him from here. Brings the vision up siege tanks in the mineral line. Not going to be enough interference matrix on the siege tank that's inside of the main base. And now he's onto the production of MarineLord. Once again, all these reactors going to get destroyed. Possibly the barracks too. Even if he cleans this up, his ability to reproduce these Marines is almost completely gone. Vikings land to soak just a little bit more Fear Dragon. And HeRoMaRinE may close it out right here. GG.